I never thought I'd be the kind of man who had to outsmart his own son, the kind who'd sit in a courtroom, watching the person I raised look everywhere but at me. But when I walked through those heavy oak doors that Tuesday morning, and my son Thomas stared at his shoes while his wife Vanessa's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, I knew we'd come to the end of something that started 64 years ago in a delivery room in Halifax. Let me take you back before the lawyers and the recordings, and the moment I realized my boy had forgotten who taught him to tie his shoes. My name is William Ashford. I'm 72 now, though until last year, people usually guessed I was in my early 60s. I kept active, you see. After my wife Margaret passed 5 years ago from pancreatic cancer, I made it my mission not to become one of those men who withers away in an armchair. I walked 5 kilometers every morning around the seawall in Vancouver, where we'd retired after I sold my accounting firm. I volunteered at the community center, teaching seniors how to use computers. I even took up woodworking, turning our basement into a small workshop where I built birdhouses and picture frames for the grandchildren I rarely saw. Thomas was my only child. We tried for more, but after 3 miscarriages, Margaret and I decided to pour everything we had into raising him right. Maybe that was our mistake. Maybe we gave him too much. A private education at St. George's School. Hockey equipment every season. A car, when he turned 16. Money for university at UBC. Then his MBA. When he wanted to start his tech company, I co-signed the loan. When it failed, I helped him find a position at a telecommunications firm. "You've always been there for me, Dad," he told me at Margaret's funeral, gripping my shoulder. Always. I believed him. The morning Thomas called last October, I was in the garage, sanding down a jewelry box I'd been making. The cypress smelled like the forest, and I was lost in the rhythm of the work when my phone buzzed. "Dad, we need to talk," Thomas said. His voice had that edge it got when he was stressed. "Are you sitting down?" "I'm in the garage. What's wrong?" "Vanessa and I have been talking. We're worried about you." I set down the sandpaper. "Worried? I'm fine, son. Healthier than I've been in years." "That's just it, Dad. You're 72 and living alone in that big house. What if you fall? What if something happens?" "I have my phone. I have neighbors. Mrs. Chen checks on me every—" "It's not enough. Look, we want you to consider something. We want to move in with you." I stood there, sawdust on my hands, trying to process what he'd said. "Move in, Thomas? You have your condo in Richmond. Your jobs are there. We can commute. Dad, please. After losing Mom, we can't stand the thought of you being alone. Let us help you. Let us be there for you, like you've always been there for me." Something in my chest loosened. Since Margaret died, the house had been too quiet. The empty chair at dinner, the silence where her laugh used to be. Having Thomas around again, having family in these rooms. "Are you sure, son?" "That's a big change." "We're sure. Vanessa's already excited about it. She wants to help organize Mom's things, if you're ready. We know you've been putting it off." I had been. Margaret's closet still held her dresses. Her books were still on the nightstand. I'd meant to sort through everything, to donate what could help others. But every time I opened that closet door, my throat closed up. "When would you want to do this?" I asked. "How about next weekend? We'll bring some essentials, get settled, and take it from there." "All right," I said. "All right, son. Come home." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling something I hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. My son was coming home. We'd have breakfast together. I could teach him woodworking like I'd always wanted to. Maybe this was what Margaret would have wanted. Maybe this was how our story was supposed to go. I should have trusted my first instinct. Thomas and Vanessa arrived the following Saturday with 3 suitcases and attention I couldn't quite name. Vanessa hugged me, but her arms were stiff. Thomas carried boxes up to the guest room without meeting my eyes for more than a second at a time. "Big change," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "You two need any help unpacking?" "We're good, Dad," Thomas said. "Actually, would you mind giving us some space? We need to get organized." I spent the afternoon in my workshop, trying not to feel dismissed in my own home. That evening, I made my grandmother's shepherd's pie, one of Thomas's favorites growing up. We sat at the dining table, the one Margaret had picked out 30 years ago, and I tried to make conversation. "So, Vanessa, how's work at the insurance company?" She exchanged a glance with Thomas. "Actually, William, I've been thinking about making a change. The hours are too demanding." "Oh? What are you thinking of doing instead?" "I'm not sure yet, just exploring options." The dinner felt like chewing cardboard. Every question I asked met a wall. Every story I tried to tell faded into uncomfortable silence. By the time I cleared the dishes, I was exhausted. "I'm heading to bed early," I said. "Long day. Thomas, it's good to have you home, son." "Yeah, Dad. Good night." I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, changed into my pajamas, and sat on the edge of the bed. Margaret's photograph smiled at me from the dresser. I picked it up, running my thumb over the glass. "What do you think, love?" I whispered. "Did we do the right thing?" She didn't answer. She never did anymore. That night I woke to voices. Low, urgent voices coming from downstairs. I checked the clock. 2:47 a.m. I got up, pulled on my robe, and moved to the top of the stairs. "Have to be patient," Thomas was saying. "Patient?" That was Vanessa, her voice sharp. "We've been paying that condo mortgage for 6 months with the line of credit maxed out. I'm drowning in credit card debt, Thomas. The visa is at 22,000. Keep your voice down." "Why?" "You heard what the doctor said. His age, living alone, the way he sometimes forgets things." "He doesn't forget things. He forgot your birthday last year. That was right after Mom died. He was grieving." "Exactly. Grief, confusion, all symptoms of early cognitive decline. The doctor said with the right documentation. I don't want to talk about this tonight." I stood frozen on the landing. Early cognitive decline? I hadn't forgotten Thomas's birthday. I'd called him. We'd had lunch. I remembered it clearly because I'd given him the watch that had belonged to my father. I crept back to my bedroom, my heart hammering. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe they were talking about someone else. But something cold had settled in my stomach. Something that tasted like intuition. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Vanessa at my computer in the study. She startled when she saw me, quickly minimizing whatever she'd been looking at. "William, you're up early." "Just my usual time. What are you working on?" "Oh, just checking email." "I hope you don't mind." "Not at all. Coffee's on." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. After she left the room, I opened my computer. The browser history showed she'd been looking at my bank statements, my investment accounts, my property tax records. I sat very still for a long time. Over the next 3 weeks, I started paying attention, really paying attention. Vanessa would go through the mail before I could get to it. Thomas would steer conversations toward my memory and my health. They'd started suggesting I see a doctor, just for a checkup, just to make sure everything was all right. "At your age, Dad, it's important to stay on top of these things," Thomas said one evening. "I saw my doctor 6 months ago. Clean bill of health. But that was 6 months ago. A lot can change." I agreed to go, mostly to quiet them. Dr. Patterson had been my physician for 15 years. He did the usual tests, asked the usual questions, and shook his head when I mentioned Thomas's concerns. "William, you're one of the sharpest patients I have," he said. "Your cognitive function is excellent. Blood pressure's good. Cholesterol's under control. I don't know what your son is worried about." I didn't tell him what I'd begun to suspect, that Thomas wasn't worried about my health at all. That night, I heard them again. This time, I was ready. I'd ordered a small digital recorder from Amazon, the kind journalists use. I kept it in my robe pocket. When I heard their voices after midnight, I pressed record and crept to the top of the stairs. "Talk to the lawyer again," Vanessa was saying. "He says with medical power of attorney, we can manage everything. His accounts, his investments, this house. Once we have control. I can't believe we're doing this. You said you were on board." "I am. He's my father. A father who's sitting on $1 million house and retirement savings while we're drowning. You said it yourself, he doesn't need all this. When was the last time he even used that workshop? He's slowing down, Thomas. This is just accelerating the inevitable." "What about the assessment?" "Dr. Morrison said he'd do it." I told him about the forgotten birthday, the times William gets confused. "He doesn't get confused. He will when Dr. Morrison examines him, trust me." I gave him enough examples, and once we have 2 doctors saying there's cognitive decline, the court will grant us power of attorney. Then, we can start making decisions. Sell this place, move him into a care facility. The equity alone would clear all our debts, and give us a fresh start. My hand trembled on the recorder. My son, my boy, planning to take my independence, my home, my life, and call it help. "What if he fights it?" Thomas asked. "He won't. By the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. And honestly, Thomas, he'll probably be relieved. No more worrying about the house, the bills, the maintenance. He'll be taken care of. I'd heard enough. I crept back to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, the recorder in my hands. Margaret's photo watched me from the dresser. "What do I do?" I whispered. This time, I knew the answer. I knew exactly what Margaret would say. She'd say, "William Ashford, you didn't build a business from nothing by letting people walk over you. You're smarter than this. Be smarter than them." The next morning, I went for my usual walk, but instead of the seawall, I drove to downtown Vancouver. To a law office I'd used years ago for business matters. David Chen had handled my corporate work when I sold my firm. He was sharp, trustworthy, and most importantly, he knew me when my mind was unquestionably sound. "William," he said, gripping my hand. "It's been what, 4 years?" "5. I need your help, David. And I need you to keep this completely confidential." I told him everything. The overheard conversations, the bank statements Vanessa had accessed, the plan to declare me incompetent. I played him the recording. David's face darkened as he listened. When it finished, he sat back in his chair. "This is elder abuse, William. Financial exploitation. We can go to the police right now." "No, not yet. I want to do this right. I want them to think they're winning right up until the moment they lose." "What do you have in mind?" Over the next hour, we crafted a plan. David would prepare new power of attorney documents, crystal clear and legally airtight, designating my financial advisor's firm as my attorney if I ever became incapacitated. He'd also prepare a new will, very different from my current one. We'd get everything notarized, witnessed, filed properly. I'll also arrange for Dr. Patterson to do a comprehensive cognitive assessment, David said, video recorded, thoroughly documented, will establish beyond any doubt that you're of sound mind right now. How long will this take? 2 weeks? Maybe 3. Can you hold out that long? I've been pretending not to notice for a month already. What's a few more weeks? William, are you sure about this? This is your son. There might be another way. I thought about Thomas at 8 years old, falling off his bike and crying in my arms. Thomas at 18, hugging me after his graduation. Thomas at 25, asking me to walk Margaret down the aisle because her father had passed. All those moments, all that love, and it led here. To a son who saw me as an obstacle, as equity to be liquidated. "I'm sure," I said. For the next 3 weeks, I became an actor. I played the role they wanted. I'd forget where I put my keys, then find them in the refrigerator with a confused smile. I'd repeat stories at dinner. I'd ask Vanessa what day it was, even though I knew perfectly well. I watched them exchange meaningful glances. I saw the hope bloom in their eyes. Hope that I was declining. Hope that their plan would work. Thomas arranged for me to see Dr. Morrison, Vanessa's chosen physician. I went along willingly. I let Dr. Morrison ask his questions. I hesitated on some answers. I got a few dates wrong. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to seem concerning. "Mr. Ashford," Dr. Morrison said gently, "have you noticed any changes in your memory lately?" "Sometimes I can't remember what I had for breakfast," I said. It was true. That morning I'd been so sick with anxiety I hadn't eaten at all. "And your son tells me you've been having trouble managing your finances? The bills are confusing now. All those numbers." I hated myself for every lie. But I'd listened to enough recordings to know what came next. The diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment. The recommendation for assistance. The court application for power of attorney. Let them think they were winning. While Thomas and Vanessa plotted, I'd been busy. I'd met with Dr. Patterson 3 times. He'd conducted every cognitive test in the book, memory assessments, problem-solving tasks. He'd video recorded everything, and written a detailed report. Patient demonstrates superior cognitive function for his age group. No signs of impairment or decline. I'd met with my financial advisor, Gordon, who'd known me for 20 years. I'd signed the new power of attorney documents in front of him, David Chen, and 2 other witnesses. All of it documented. All of it time-stamped. All of it proving that, on these specific dates, I was unquestionably competent. I'd also done something else. Something Margaret would have called sneaky. I'd installed security cameras. Tiny ones, the kind that look like smoke detectors. One in the study, one in the living room, one in the kitchen. All streaming to cloud storage that Thomas and Vanessa didn't know existed. And I'd captured everything. Vanessa going through my documents. Thomas photographing my bank statements. Their late-night conversations about selling the house, about which care facility was cheapest, about how much they'd net after paying off their debts. "It's not wrong," Vanessa said on one recording. "We're family. This money would come to Thomas eventually anyway. We're just accelerating the timeline." "He's going to hate us," Thomas said. "He won't understand what's happening. That's the whole point. By the time he's in Oakhaven Manor, he'll have forgotten why he's even there." I'd played that recording 10 times, trying to find my son in those words, trying to find the boy who'd cried when his hamster died, who'd defended smaller kids from bullies, who'd told me at his mother's funeral that he'd always be there for me. He was gone. Or maybe he'd never been who I thought he was. David called me on a Wednesday afternoon. "It's done," he said. "They filed the court application yesterday. We have a hearing date, 2 weeks from Friday. And everything's ready on our end? William, we have enough documentation to bury them. Are you absolutely certain about this?" I looked around the house. Margaret's favorite armchair, the kitchen where we'd cooked together for 40 years, the bedroom where we'd held each other through good news and bad. This was my home, my life, my choice. "I'm certain." The night before the hearing, Thomas knocked on my bedroom door. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, the same spot where I'd sat so many nights missing Margaret. "Dad, can I come in?" "Of course, son." He sat beside me. For a moment, he was 8 years old again, small and scared after a nightmare. But then I blinked, and he was 43, gray starting at his temples, lines around his eyes. "I want you to know," he said slowly, "that everything we're doing is because we love you, because we want what's best for you." I nodded. "I know you think that, Thomas. Tomorrow is going to be hard. But it's necessary. You'll see. Once everything's settled, you'll understand. You'll be taken care of. No more worries. No more choices either." "Dad." "It's all right, son. I understand. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions." He hugged me. I hugged him back, memorizing the moment. My boy. My son. In a few hours, I was going to break his heart. But he'd broken mine first, in 1,000 small betrayals that started the moment he'd decided I was no longer a father but an asset. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, rehearsing what I'd say, checking and rechecking the folder David had prepared, going over the timeline. At 4 a.m., I got up and put on my best suit, the charcoal gray one Margaret had helped me pick out for our 40th anniversary party. I knotted my tie the way she'd taught me. "Not too tight, William. You're not trying to choke yourself." I stood in front of the mirror. 72 years old. Silver hair, lines on my face like a map of everywhere I'd been. But my eyes were clear, sharp, the eyes of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. "For you, love," I whispered to Margaret's memory. "For the life we built together." The courthouse was downtown, a modern building of glass and steel. Thomas and Vanessa were already there, talking with their lawyer, a woman in a burgundy suit. They both startled when they saw me. "Dad," Thomas said, "you're early. We were going to pick you up." "I can still drive, son. Still find my way around Vancouver." Something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, maybe, or fear. But Vanessa stepped forward, taking my arm like I was fragile. "Come on, William. Let's get you settled." David was waiting inside the courtroom. He caught my eye, gave a small nod. Everything was ready. We sat in silence, waiting. Vanessa kept patting my hand like I was a child. Thomas stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Their lawyer shuffled papers, confident. Then the judge entered. The Honorable Justice Sarah Mackenzie. She'd been on the bench for 15 years, with a reputation for thorough review and low tolerance for frivolous claims. "All rise." We stood, we sat, and the hearing began. Thomas's lawyer went first, painting a picture of a declining elderly man who could no longer care for himself. She presented Dr. Morrison's assessment. She talked about forgotten birthdays, misplaced items, confusion about bills. "Mr. Ashford's own son has witnessed this decline," she said. "Thomas Ashford and his wife have moved into his home to provide care, but they've realized that their father needs more help than they can provide. They're seeking power of attorney not for their benefit, but for his protection." Justice Mackenzie listened, making notes. Then she looked at me. "Mr. Ashford, do you understand why we're here today?" I started to stand, and David touched my arm, nodding. I rose, my legs steady. "Yes, Your Honor. I understand perfectly. My son and his wife believe I'm no longer capable of managing my own affairs. They want to take control of my home, my finances, and my life. They believe they're doing this for my own good. And how do you feel about that? I feel, I said slowly, that they've underestimated me. Vanessa shifted in her seat. Thomas's face went pale. Your Honor, David stood. May I present evidence on behalf of Mr. Ashford? Proceed. What happened next took 90 minutes, but I remember it like a slow-motion film. David presented Dr. Patterson's comprehensive assessment, complete with video recordings of me solving complex problems, recalling detailed information, demonstrating cognitive function that exceeded the average for my age group. He presented the new power of attorney documents I'd signed weeks earlier, properly witnessed and notarized, all documenting my clear competency. He presented statements from my financial advisor, my accountant, my neighbors, all attesting to my sharp mind and independent living. And then he presented the security footage. The courtroom had a screen. On it, Thomas and Vanessa appeared, crystal clear, time-stamped, undeniable, going through my papers, photographing my accounts, and then the audio from my recordings played through the speakers. Vanessa's voice. Once we have 2 doctors saying there's cognitive decline, the court will grant us power of attorney. Then we can start making decisions. Sell this place, move him into a care facility. The equity alone would clear all our debts. I watched Thomas's face as he heard his own voice responding. Watched the color drain away. Watched the moment he realized what I'd done. Justice Mackenzie's expression shifted from professional neutrality to something harder. When the last recording finished, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Mr. Ashford, she said, her voice carefully controlled, you have been remarkably patient. I wanted to be sure, Your Honor. I wanted them to show me who they really were. She turned to Thomas and Vanessa. Her eyes were cold. This application is denied. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the authorities for investigation of potential elder abuse and fraud. Mr. Ashford's legal team will provide all evidence. She looked at their lawyer. Counsel, I suggest you have a very serious conversation with your clients about their exposure here. Thomas stood up suddenly. Dad, please. Sit down, Justice Mackenzie said sharply. Mr. Ashford, do you wish to add anything? I looked at my son, at the boy I'd raised, at the man who'd tried to steal my life while calling it love. Your Honor, I have one request. I want them out of my house today. I want the locks changed, and I want them to understand something. I turned to face Thomas directly. You were supposed to be the person I could trust when I couldn't trust myself anymore. Instead, you became the person I had to protect myself from. That's not love, son. That's not family. Your mother would be ashamed. Thomas's face crumpled. Vanessa grabbed his arm, whispering urgently, but he shook her off. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It got out of control. The debt, the pressure, Vanessa said. Don't, I said. Don't blame her. You made choices, Thomas. You could have come to me. You could have asked for help. Instead, you plotted to declare me incompetent, so you could use me as an ATM. Those were your choices. Mr. Thomas Ashford, Justice Mackenzie said, you're dismissed, and I suggest you seek legal counsel immediately. We're adjourned. The gavel came down like a period at the end of a sentence. I walked out of that courtroom with my head high. David squeezed my shoulder. You did it, William. You protected yourself. I destroyed my family. No. They did that themselves. You just refused to be a victim. Outside, the Vancouver rain had started, that soft spring rain that makes everything smell new. I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing it in. Free, still in control of my own life, still William Ashford, not some incompetent old man to be managed and filed away. Thomas caught up to me on the steps. He was crying, something I hadn't seen since his mother died. Dad, please, let me explain. Let me make this right. How? I asked. How do you make this right, Thomas? You recorded me. You coached doctors. You planned to lock me away in some facility and sell the home your mother and I built together. How do you fix that? I don't know, but I want to try. I need to try. I looked at him. Rain was soaking his shirt. His face was the same face that had looked up at me on his first day of school, scared and brave at the same time. I need time, I said finally. I need a lot of time, Thomas, and I need you to get help, real help, because the son I raised would never have done this. Somewhere along the way, you lost yourself. Maybe it was debt. Maybe it was Vanessa's influence. Maybe it was something else. But until you find out who you really are, until you can look me in the eye and take full responsibility without excuses, we have nothing to say to each other. How long? I don't know. Maybe years, maybe never. That's up to you. I walked away. I got in my car and drove home to my empty house. The locks were already changed. David had arranged it. Thomas and Vanessa's belongings were in boxes on the porch. I'd never have to see them inside again. That night, I sat in Margaret's armchair, holding her photo. I did it, love, I whispered. I protected our home. I protected myself. But God, it hurts. The house was quiet. Too quiet. But it was my quiet, my choice, my life. 3 months have passed now. The police investigation is ongoing. Thomas has been calling once a week, leaving messages. I haven't answered yet. Maybe I will someday. Maybe I won't. I've gone back to my woodworking. I'm building a hope chest, the kind with intricate carvings. Maybe for the grandchildren, if Thomas and I ever find our way back to each other. Maybe just for me. To hold the memories of the family we used to be. People ask me sometimes, when they hear the story, if I regret it. If I wish I'd just let it go, kept the peace, preserved the relationship. I tell them no, because the thing about getting older isn't that you get weaker or more confused or less capable. It's that you get clearer. You understand what matters. And what matters is your dignity, your autonomy, your right to live your life on your terms for as long as you possibly can. Thomas tried to take that from me while calling it love. But love doesn't plot and scheme. Love doesn't forge documents and coach doctors. Love doesn't look at someone and see equity instead of a human being. Real love would have knocked on my door and said, "Dad, we're in trouble. We need help." Real love would have been honest. I would have helped him. I would have done anything for my son. But he never gave me the chance. He chose the secret route, the manipulation, the betrayal. And that choice, that moment when he decided I was an obstacle instead of his father, that's the moment our relationship died. Everything after was just formality. So no, I don't regret it. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my son became someone I had to protect myself from. I regret that Margaret didn't live to see what he became, because it would have broken her heart. But protecting myself, standing up in that courtroom and refusing to be a victim, that I'll never regret. I'm 72 years old. I walk 5 kilometers every morning. I volunteer at the community center. I build furniture in my workshop. I manage my own bills, make my own decisions, and live in the home I chose. I'm not anyone's problem to solve. I'm not equity to be liquidated. I'm not confused or declining or in need of management. I'm William Ashford. I'm a widower, a father, a grandfather. I'm a man who loved his son enough to let him face the consequences of his actions, who loved himself enough to fight for his independence. And if my son ever finds his way back to being someone I can trust, someone worthy of the man I raised him to be, I'll be here, in this house, in this life I fought to keep. Until then, I walk my 5 kilometers, I build my furniture, I live my life, and that's enough. That has to be enough, because the alternative is surrendering who I am to please people who stopped seeing me as human. And I fought too hard, in that courtroom, and in all the days after, to ever do that. I'm not going gentle. I'm not going at all. Not until I'm good and ready. And that's my choice to make. Mine alone.